All right, welcome everybody for our first webinar of the year. We're going to be keeping pace on these and doing one a month, and we'll be talking about what our upcoming webinar is. But today we've been fielding a lot of questions from owners about the screening process and navigating the applications. And so nobody better to have on this meeting with me than James Rice, who has been working with me, dare I say, for 11 years. And
Uh,
as working towards talking to new owners and agents and everybody that's in the industry, especially about leasing. James has been an expert about getting properties filled, getting good tenants in the door. So, James, thanks for joining me today. I know this subject's right up your alley.
yeah, looking forward to it. Thanks for having me.
I can't believe 11 years. I can assume you've processed thousands of applications in that time.
Yes, thousands, and actually, we just crossed over the 1,100 door count of units rented in 11 years. Um, so we're plugging along.
Plugging along for sure. So for those that are joining today, I really appreciate it. The conversation that we want to have is just about the fact that, fair housing issues stem from generally process failures. It's not the intent. And so we really want to cover a lot of the basics, stuff that people may or may not know. And some of the things that are so remedial is, just simply you can't overcharge on your application fee, something that many are not aware of. But that's the very finite aspect of it. We're going to get into more about the rent laws that continue to evolve in DC proper, in Montgomery County, Maryland, Virginia also continue to change. And we're in all three jurisdictions, so we're very mindful of everything that's going on in each of them and what the expectations are for all. The application process obviously is going to be the highest risk areas for landlords. Getting a good quality tenant, presumably that pay the rent and take care of the place is the first two things that we're really hoping to seek for all of our clients. And so making sure that you have that process in place to really get the best selection, best option for you, that snapshot in time. We're going to be talking a lot about the voucher process because it is increasing, but there's still misconceptions that remain in the process and misunderstandings. We're going to point out a handful of spots where people do, in fact, find trip ups or potential for delay and try to work you through that as best we can. And then and just to reiterate that those missteps do cause delays. And so I've talked to owners that have been working through this process for months without an end in sight. And so trying to avoid that, avoid the complaints, avoid the legal exposure associated with it is our intention, and stuff that we've worked and learned and expanded upon and revise and continue to revise as we work through more and more of them. So, James, I'm going to flip this over and really give you the overview because, as we're talking about the difference between market rate tenants and voucher leasing and presumably the Section 8 program, we recognize that there's a couple paths. And so let's start with the basics. There is just one housing standard, right? So tell me a little bit, just as a precursor to the general process that we work through, because applications are the same for all.
Correct. Yes. So it is very important when you put properties on the market for rent that your standards are the same for everybody. That is fair housing, 101 basic stuff. So the way we look at it at EJF is we look at income, we look at financial background, which is another fancy word for credit. We look at employment, past landlord history, debt to income ratio. Those are the only things that should really matter when vetting a tenant. And you have a process put in place with benchmarks that need to be met in order for someone to be conditionally approved. After the tenant is conditionally approved, we do their criminal background screening prior to them signing a lease, which I know we're going to get to soon. So
Yeah. So different processes does not mean different standards,
no,
right?
nope,
And
nope.
so how do you explain to owners that they can follow different processes without treating applicants differently?
Well, for market rate tenants, it's more in line with what you want the process to be, if that makes sense. You have an application come in, you request, certain documentation. You ask for the deposit. You can get the lease signed within a certain, time frame. When it comes to housing, the process is not really in your control. Like there are steps that you have to follow, and there's things on there on the RFTA packet where there is general timelines, but you're really at the mercy of DC when it comes to that process, which I know we're going to get to as well. So it's a little bit different than the market rate tenants versus a voucher tenant.
Right. And so we're going to talk about those timelines because that probably is one of the biggest differences between the way that you navigate these.
Correct.
All right. So screening criteria still must be applied consistently, right?
Yep. Yes.
And so when we're going through those applications, you're looking at the same thing each and every single time, and making sure those standards are met. All right, let's talk a little bit about our expectation. Key points. Knock these out.
Yep, absolutely. So the way we do it, first come, first serve. So if you have a fully completed application first, that would mean anybody over the age of 18 would need to apply with a separate application, pay a separate application fee, and they will be grouped together. And assuming you have two people there, two applications are in, they're first in line, they'll get first dibs on the property. And that is applied to not only, one property, but to every property that we have that we're renting in the district.
All right. And I generally would say that those that are most interested in your property tend to treat it the best, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And so making sure that we have that good match is success for all. And so when it comes to first come, first serve, same expectation, even when demand's high, right? Like I think the dynamic shifts and sometimes all you will get is one, right?
One. Yeah.
And how often are you seeing people getting 10 applications at a time these days?
Not a lot. I mean, that really has changed a lot since, I have to think back to COVID, 2020, 2021. I've been, receiving a lot more just one-off applications. More and more recently as the market has, trended in more of a, not so positive direction. We're seeing a lot more just one-off applications. Now, those applications for the most part are good. It's people that want the property, and, all it takes is one, right? To get them in the door. But we are seeing a lot less multiple applications being submitted at the same time.
That's what I gotten to understand. And so at that point, obviously, first come, first served, most qualified certainly is what we want to talk about. And of course, there's the conditional approvals that we have to implement, especially with the DC criminal screening laws. And so when they're first come, first serve, and we give that conditional acceptance, how long do we give them to wrap things up?
Yeah. So the way that we have it set up is they're conditionally approved. And what we require is for them to pay the deposit within 48 hours. By paying the deposit, that gives us permission to run their criminal background. This is something that DC passed, I believe it was in 2017, where you have to conditionally accept somebody prior to running their criminal approval. The way we work it is, okay, give us the deposit. That means we will, run the criminal at that point, assuming they meet the criminal background requirements, which 99.9% of our tenants do, just because it's really just weeding out very violent offenders within the last 7 years. Then once they pass that, then we require them to submit to sign the lease within 72 hours after the fact.
All right. And so I know we keep just about everything, but what documentation should landlords retain to demonstrate that their screening criteria is applied uniformly?
So the paperwork that we require is the same across the board. So it's basic information, tenants' contact information. We request a copy of their photo ID, the last two pay stubs. If they just started a new job, a signed offer letter, stating how much they make. We request landlord references. And we also get a copy of their credit report and their criminal background. You want to make sure that you have all of that information. And obviously, we have a fancy software that holds all that for us. It makes it very easy.
And now, granted, we're processing lots of applications. Independent landlords might just do an application and then maybe 3, 4 years later, who knows,
Right.
before they have to process one again. So it's really important to make sure that you keep that track record to maintain that consistency. And so, our requirements do help with our evaluations to make sure that our residents are set for success, right? We really want to position everybody to be in the best position possible. Now, granted, we do acknowledge life happens. People lose jobs, couples break up, what have you.
Right.
But at the same time, as we're going through these income requirements, the debt to income considerations, financial background, are there any things here that are worth pointing out that owners should be keeping on their radar as they work through this, as we do for our clients?
So the biggest thing I think is the criminal screening. You know, we have a software that's set up and we're able to manipulate it in a way that we can separate out the credit screening versus the criminal screening. And it's really just a click of a button where it says, okay, this person has been conditionally approved. We can run the criminal at that point. So if you are, a just regular old landlord, right, doing this on your own, you just want to make sure that you find the correct software, or at least, inquire about it where you can have that separated. You just want to make sure you're in compliance with that law. Now, the other thing is, with the income requirement, I believe that our standards are a little bit higher than other management companies. I mean, I don't want to speak for everybody, but it's about 3.5 times the monthly rent. So I've seen other people do 2.75 or 3. But the way we look at it is we just want to be extra cautious, just have a little bit more certainty that the people that we're going to be putting in the property have the best ability to pay rent. Now, like Conrad said, people break up, people lose jobs. These are things that are out of our control, right? But we just want to make sure we have an extra layer of protection when it comes to the income side of things.
Yep, that little snapshot in time,
Yep.
and then document.
Yep.
All right, I love it. All right, so we're going to talk a little more about the voucher program and some of the aspects associated with those timelines, those expectations. And one of the big ones is generally about getting the property to be passing inspection, being in compliance. And so, as a quick heads up, this is going to be our next webinar, is breaking down that inspection, the difference between licensing requirements, potential shortfalls that owners may not consider as they're preparing their property for tenancy. Sometimes it's cosmetics, sometimes it's a housing code. But ultimately, this is going to overlay the best practices so that owners are able to prepare their property, which helps lead for faster leasing, which means fewer maintenance issues, and generally overall stronger tenant retention. And I can't talk strong enough about the fact that the longer the tenant stays, the more owners do make, right? It's the tenancy, the vacancy, the turnover that generally does hinder owners from hitting those numbers that they're really trying to hit. And so let's talk about the housing choice voucher program and in reality, because I know that when you mentioned the market rate tenants, we could receive an application today, and as long as we cross T's, dot I's, and do all of our due diligence, we could get a well-qualified applicant in the next week or so, right? Because our turnaround tends to be reasonably quick, and acceptance and the lease signing can be a handful of days. The program, however, may take a couple of months. So what's the most common misconception you encounter about the process?
Well, the one thing I always hear, especially for people that have vouchers, is, I can move in tomorrow. I hear that a lot. And, I say, okay, well, being familiar with the process, it does take time. And, if you have someone that has a voucher and you're managing a property for the owner, you need to set expectations and let them know that this process is not quick. Um, in a perfect world, you can get somebody in there within 30 days, but it's more in line with about 2 months given the process. So, you know, the I think the biggest misconception is the fact that you have people that think you can move very quickly on these things, and it's just not the reality of the situation, and a lot of it is out of your control, unfortunately.
Yeah. And this first point is that housing, the DHCA, the Housing Authority, does not screen those tenants. You still
Yes,
have to do due diligence.
correct.
Just because somebody has applied through the program does not mean that they've been vetted, right?
That is
Not,
correct.
not for that. And so you do need to screen them the same way as you would for anyone else. And it also doesn't mean that it's automatically going to be approved. We're going to talk about this in a little bit about the timelines, but let's talk about price real quick. Sometimes
Right.
there can be a misconception in terms of what you may be able to get through the program.
And I've seen it. Sorry. Yeah, I've seen it go both ways too. Like we've put the property on the market for rent at a market rate, let's just say at $3,000 for a 3 bedroom. And, DC comes back and says, you can actually get 4,000 for this place. Or the other way around. We asked for 5 grand and they're like, no, we're not paying more than like 3,800. So, and we're gonna touch on this, but this is one of the issues that we run into with DC is you know the rent reasonableness is not very clear coming out of DCHA. So
Yeah. And so as we're working with clients, I know that these are conversations you have all the time. How do you help our owners understand the screening process?
um so with the screening process, I assume you want to get into the differences, correct? And
Well, more about the timelines because we're going to get
okay,
into
okay,
that on the next screen. So really, this is
I
going to
understand.
just lead right into it. So let's talk about the pricing and the timelines. So
Pricing and timelines. Yeah. So the way I explain this to the owner is, you know, like I was mentioning, in a perfect world, we can get somebody in there within 30 days, but I let them know that it's on average taking about 2 months to get somebody in there. And that's even with a property that is in really, really good shape. I've seen a lot of these times where these properties have basic business license, they have C of Os, they are 100% ready to go. DC will come out and flag 4 or 5 different things, and it's going to delay the process still. There's not real consistency between one part of DC doing inspections versus housing doing inspections. So I let them know in advance that there could be some frustrating moments, but we're going to try to work with DC as quickly as possible to get them into the unit as quickly as possible. The way the RFTA packet is set up is, and I don't know, I don't think we have it here in the webinar, but if you submit the packet by the 5th day of the month, the way it's set up is then you can have someone move in the first of the following month, but you have to, hit every single marker on that RFTA packet. And it's, more times than not, you're not going to be able to, unfortunately, in a perfect world. In a perfect world, we would want to. Um, Now, switching over to screening a tenant for a voucher, is this a good time to talk about that?
well, just for anybody that's not familiar with the RFTA, that's the request for tenancy approval. I'm just going to post that in the chat.
Yeah,
It
good
is
point.
a 30-page packet, 30 pages. The first page is going to outline a lot of those expectations that we're referencing. But, just in terms of getting it submitted after you've already qualified and presumably determine that you're going to be working with this potential applicant, submitting this to DC, determining the eligibility, scheduling the inspections. There's a lot of opportunities to be tripped up. There's a lot of opportunities that if it's not done right, it could cause delays. And so this is where our expertise comes into the equation. So when you're looking to hit those 30 to 45 day timelines, this is the benefit of having us on board as your management company versus troubleshooting this sometimes looking at it for the first time. I've talked to plenty of owners of late where, they're saying, hey, I'm working through the process. A month later, I'm still working through the process, and not making much headway. And so,
Right.
I want to make sure that we do. So yeah, do expand upon on that initial inspection and the paperwork.
Yeah. So the paper. So once the paperwork is submitted, we submit you have to submit it through I believe it's called DCHA. It's a portal and we can post it here. I'll post it in the chat. But once it's submitted, it's reviewed by DCHA. The way it's set up is they said it takes about 2 weeks for it to be reviewed before somebody will get back to you to schedule an inspection to see the property. Now they'll reach out to you once they reviewed the packet and everything in there is 100% good. The issue is with some of these packets, sometimes they're so lengthy that someone may miss something or, something is incorrect in the packet and they'll ask you to correct it or redo the whole packet. So it's very important when you submit it the first time, you double, triple, quadruple check it before it gets to DCHA because they don't have a lot of grace when it comes to to mistakes with these packets. Now, once someone does review it, they'll send an inspector by, and they will inspect the property. In a perfect world, the property is 100% ready to go. That's when they'll also confirm the rent reasonableness at that point, which can be a problem in some respects because an owner may be looking for X amount of money and DC may come back and say, no, it's actually worth $1,000 a month less. So then at that point, you have to make a decision in terms of, okay, do we proceed with accepting that? Or, we say, no, we're going to have to go, back on the market and try to find a different renter.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll stop there.
Well, I mean, you're really serving it up because, I mean, when we go through this and we talk about the timelines and the back and forth and all of the stuff that we know we've done, we've executed for many an owner. When I'm talking to owners that are just like, well, I'll do this myself and I'll save on the leasing fee or I'll save on the management fee. I mean, vacancy is the hidden cost of managing property, right? And so, in theory, how long does it make sense before this actually becomes more expensive to an owner, to a landlord?
Right. Totally.
Yeah. And so all of these points that we're making is about the execution, about the process in order to make sure that we get from A to Z as timely as possible. And that does come with experience and expertise in the field.
Yep.
So, and of course, once you get past the inspections, which does trip up some owners, certainly, including the conversations that we have with some of our clients where they roll the dice and wait to see, but inevitably there tends to be something found that needs to be corrected. The rent reasonableness, making sure that you find a rent that everybody's comfortable with, and then executing the lease and HAP contracts, and then, of course, setting up the deposits so that we can receive those funds on clients' behalf. We do all of this, right? And so now, of course, there are some differences. And so if we're looking at market rate versus voucher, this is going to tee up that conversation about, the speed and the structure. What are we looking at between the differences between the two generally as far as your efforts?
So obviously for market rate tenants, it's more under your control and you can get people in a lot quicker. Like I mentioned, we have set deadlines, getting the deposit in within 48 hours, getting the lease signed within 72 hours. And, barring a, requirement with a building that may need notice for a move in, we can get somebody into a property, within 48 hours. I just did one this past weekend at one of our Foggy Bottom properties where someone applied on a Friday and I got him in there on a Sunday with the vetting, and, they were able to pay rent and sign the lease and, get them moved in. With vouchers, as I mentioned, it's more out of your control. And you're looking at least 30 days from beginning to end of the place being vacant. And even with our expertise and knowing what to do, knowing the paperwork and the what's involved, it's still taking about 2 months to get somebody in there for a voucher tenant on average.
And of course, we've been talking a lot about the existing market. Now there's seasonality, there's been government shutdowns. The last couple of months have been a challenge for many in the industry. And so what's one thing that you wish every landlord kind of understood about the leasing environment today? What would it be?
Yeah, so it's a good question. Like Conrad mentioned, I've been renting properties for 11 years now. And prior to COVID, I would say that there was still a majority of market rate tenants that were looking at properties that are 3 bedrooms or more. Um, then, all of a sudden COVID hit. And, really since 2021, 2022, I've seen that shift in the direction of there being more voucher applicants for 3 bedrooms or more versus the market rate tenants looking for 3 bedrooms or more. Now, it's probably more even during the summertime because you're looking at, families coming in, for schools or, young professionals right out of college or grad school that are looking to live together. But, over the course of the last 12, 15 months or so, it's been predominantly voucher applicants for 3 bedrooms or more. And it doesn't really matter where the property is located in DC. I'm talking all over the place. So, you know, it's one of those things where I go back to there was a lot of funding that was involved in 2022 and 2023 that put an additional 5,000 people on the voucher roll. And I was looking at some quick stats earlier today, and the number of households has gone up exponentially in DC with people that have vouchers. And I saw somewhere it's 15 or 16,000 homes in DC that have some sort of government assistance with this voucher program. And I feel like that's not going to slow down anytime soon. We're going to be seeing more and more of these things.
Yeah. Well, there's always been seasonality to the market.
Yeah.
And of course, the larger the home, the more challenging it could potentially be in the off season now. But at the same time, I definitely see that happen. But truth be told, for all clients, all you need is one, right? And so we can work with you to make sure that we're facilitating and maintaining and securing those good quality applicants for you. And so regardless of the difference, but this is where our professional support comes in. And so, we need to have and maintain that screening and fair housing to reduce that risk, because inconsistency subjects you to potential challenges with that regard, right? We have owners that miss deadlines or fail the inspection. That inevitably delays approvals, especially when it comes to housing. The incomplete RFTAs, right? Needing to know what you need to provide and what they're asking for can stall the leasing process. And then, of course, document, right? We always want to maintain everything and to be able to support that position, but also the uniformity amongst our processes. And then, of course, there's the time versus, the management cost. Your time versus our fees. And I ultimately remind all owners, especially those that are the small housing providers, which are providing the overwhelming majority of the affordable housing stock in this city, that our fees are deductible. I'm not an accountant, so this isn't tax advice, but our fees are deductible, but their time is not. And so as we go through this, these are things that we can implement to help you save your time,
Right.
right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So with that, we want to make sure that owners know that we are managing investment properties for those independent landlords. We have consistent screening and documented processes across the boards when we're navigating the application processes, and the full management of all of our properties across the board straight through until we end that lease cycle and the tenants are vacating, security deposits are returned, and presumably starting all over again. We know all of the jurisdictions, DC, Maryland, Virginia. We have the capacity well outside the Beltway. And of course, we're doing this to reduce the stress, may help you have fewer mistakes, and presumably promote a better outcome across the boards. So, with that said, I really appreciate your time, James. You really knocked this one out of the park, and I know you've done this for thousands of owners across the years. But I'll open this up for any questions that anybody may have.
We got a few. We have a few.
Good. I don't have as easy access. Can you collect a few?
Yeah. So there was one in here. I will start at the top. We need to ask when they registered for a voucher because it is for max for 2 years. So we need to know how long they have had this voucher, correct? Um, I'm not sure about that answer. The big thing which I wanted to talk about, Conrad, and we may have missed it, was the screening for vouchers with DC law is slightly different than market rate tenants. This is in line with when someone is awarded a voucher. So I think I might be taking this question in a slightly different direction here, but when it comes to vetting tenants that have vouchers, there's two really main differences that DC law has implemented. And one has to do with income. If the voucher is being paid 100%, then you can't look at their income, period. Doesn't matter if they make $0 and $1 million. Obviously, if they make $1 million, they probably don't have a voucher. But that's one thing that you can't look at. The second thing is the credit history. So we have to look at when the voucher was awarded, and base the credit decision off of that. And credit, financial background, same thing. So, for example, if someone got a voucher awarded to them on June 1st, 2025, okay, as a housing provider, I can only look and accept or reject them based on their credit history from June 1st, 2025. So they could have delinquencies, collections, past due amounts, just, whatever before that. And that's not something I can base a rejection off of. Now, if they have stuff like that after June 1st, 2025, then that's something that, you can, reject or ask them to, clarify what's this on the report. So it is important that you look at when a voucher was awarded to them, when you were also looking at their credit. So I don't know if that answers that question, but I just wanted to make sure that people were aware of that. Let's see. Next question from Michelle. Can you favor someone else who can move in faster? Losing 2 months of rent is insignificant. I mean, I think you meant is significant. So this is a question that I would consult an attorney on. I've never had to run into an issue where we've accepted a voucher tenant, and then proceeded with moving in another direction. I think that is definitely a little bit of a gray area, and something that I would consider speaking with an attorney on, just because you are in a way telling someone that you are going to rent the place to them and then, pulling that out to get somebody in there, it may be something that, could be challengeable.
Well, and also, as we talked about earlier, it's not too often that you're going to receive 10 applications in a property and then have to dissect each and review and consider which one is the best for you, the most qualified. But
Right.
losing 2 months is significant. You're right. And so there's an importance of being able to get these things done timely and be able to move quickly. I think for us right now, we've always broken down the vacancy period into a couple different buckets because you do have to get the property prepped and ready. You do have to market, and then inevitably there's going to be some timelines between when they apply to when they move in, right? And so when you add those up, some properties do turn out to be a couple of months regardless.
Right.
And so those are all opportunities for us to reduce that timeline and that vacancy period for our clients,
Absolutely.
right?
This next question, or am I still going? Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. This next question is a good one. Why is credit such a big issue for voucher holders when the rent is guaranteed to be paid? I think that's a great question. And what I look at is two things. First of all, for a lot of the houses that voucher tenants are paying for, they are responsible for the utilities. So even if, they're getting the, 100%, paid, they're still going to be responsible for water, sewer, trash, gas, electric, landscaping, gutter cleaning. So in my opinion, in the way that our requirements are set forth with credit, with the confines of DC law, is I think it will shed light on their potential behavior in the property. If they don't have good credit or good past financial background history, I get it, it's 100% going to be paid, but what's going to happen with those utilities? Like what? So it's just something that you got to take a look at. And if that's, the risk that you want to take on, I mean, that's up to you. So,
Wow.
Just something that you want to think about.
Yeah, and of course, being mindful of what their past performance is, to be aware of what we can potentially anticipate going forward. Because you do want to make sure that all obligations are met regardless, and
Correct.
have those backup plans in place, or at least the processes in place if things do shift. So the one question from about renting to a voucher resident that no longer qualifies is certainly something I think we're going to be covering on a future webinar. But ultimately, you want to make sure that you're doing your due diligence on the front end to determine if they're going to be able to maintain that long term, right? And so you can always refer back and have those conversations with housing and find out why they lost their capacity or lost the assistance to begin with.
Gotcha.
Um, um,
Um, Sorry.
let's not, we'll handle a couple more, but we're almost at
Okay.
time. So let's do two or three more.
Okay. So quick one, tip B, how far back can you look at their eviction conviction history? So for the criminal background screening, you can only look at the last 7 years of someone's criminal history, and you
Mm.
can only reject them based off of quote violent offenses. So we're talking about, you know, you know, murder, manslaughter, rape, arson, things of that nature, which, are obviously very, very, terrible things. But my thing with the law is, generally speaking, with a lot of these offenses that have happened in the last 7 years, you know, you're not probably walking around. You're not, for a lot of these things, you're probably, in jail or some sort of parole situation. So, I think the law is, I mean, it's the law. We're going to follow it, but I think it's a little bit, counterintuitive in my opinion. And hurts single family landlords, but that's the law. So,
And then that kind of goes along with maybe what could potentially hurt our owners in terms of DC determining that the property is worth less than what you're asking. Um, because ultimately we're trying to get what somebody's willing to pay for it. I mean, heck, we'd love to make 10 grand a month for all of our clients, but that just isn't doable. We're going to be subject to what people are willing to pay for it. And so we talked earlier about the fact that we've seen the rents potentially increasing or decreasing, and of course there's going to be the natural flow of the market to begin with. But if the owner if we're marketing it for one price and housing says that they'll offer another, it's a decision to be made. No different than if an applicant were to say, "Hey, I know you're asking 3 grand, but I'll offer 28. Will you accept it?" Right?
Right.
So if the number is not something that's going to be agreed to, we negotiate, reject, right? And then potentially continue marketing the property to see if we can get somebody that's willing to meet that number, right?
Correct. Yeah. So a couple of quick things here, and I know we're running out of time.
Mhm.
Um, One, if the voucher is less than what you're asking for, no, you cannot ask them to pay the difference. That is stated in the HAP contract. I even joined a DCHA seminar and asked the same question about 3 years ago because I had an owner that wanted to do that. No, that is not allowed. I know landlords do that, but just be very, very cautious about that. Um, then the other one that I saw was about how does the rent get established. So it used to be by neighborhood and by the number of bedrooms, but now they use a more comparative market analysis approach through affordablehousing.com. So they're going
Mhm.
to look at different houses in the neighborhood that are around the same square footage, around the same price as yours, and base the rent that they will be willing to pay off of that CMA. So that's why it's I mean, I don't know if random is the right word, but it's not something that you can just say, okay, this is what it's going to be, because if there's other properties that pop up that are less or more than what was there previously a couple weeks ago, then that number is always going to fluctuate. So that was the only other thing I wanted to answer as well.
All right. Well, I see that there's still a ton of questions, and I would be happy to reach out. We're going to take a quick screenshot, and anybody that we didn't get to, I'll try to reach out to discuss. I will say that the rapid rehousing conversation is something, Chris, I can connect with you on. But as far as it goes, we are offering up the opportunity to review your market position. If you want to reach out to me, I'm happy to do an analysis of your property. And at the same time, for any owners that do sign up with us within the next, by the end of the month, we're going to be giving up 2 months worth of management fees for making the transition. We do have leasing fees, we do have monthly management fees, but in the end of the day, we're removing a lot of this from your shoulders and taking the heavy lift, the burden, and implementing our expertise because quite frankly, it's our expertise isn't about avoiding the vouchers or the regulations. It's about navigating them confidently, and so that's where we're able to really give everybody the benefit of our position. So thank you all for joining us today. I really appreciate it, and I thank you, James, for sitting in and sharing all of your insight with everybody as we continue to watch these markets shift.
Absolutely. My pleasure, Conrad. See you guys.
Thank you.